All right. I have the unique distinction to be able to walk around with a microphone in my hand like Phil Donahue. So, good afternoon. My name is Tim. I come from Oregon. And y'all here for the Scenes of Compassion class? Yeah? Yes? Okay. Who was in the death notification class yesterday? Some of it will be a repeat, but not a lot, because today is more about on-scene stuff. Right, on-scene stuff. So, scenes of compassion. I mean, really, why are we going to talk about this? First of all, I spent 30 years in the fire service in Oregon. I was a captain. I was a paramedic on a fire engine for 22 of that 30 years. The last 8 years of my career, they put me in behavioral health. My employer figured out that we had free counseling to firefighters and their families via an EAP. Firefighters tend not to talk to anybody outside of their culture, so we weren't using the EAP. So I became an internal EAP. As a uniformed employee, my job was to make sure the men and women we hired who thought they scored the best gig in the world continue to think they had the best gig in the world, which in fact is not a bad gig for me. In retirement, I have a private practice in Oregon. I'll fly through some of this. I think it's on your app. I have a private practice in Oregon. I treat stress-related issues in firefighters and police officers. Those are the only people that I talk to. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a treatable injury. That's what I treat. And it's the modalities for treatment now, it doesn't take a long time. We can get you back operational. And that's the majority of what I do at home. But I travel a ton, and my job is to go in an organization, unfortunately, usually after an employee or two suicide, and my job is to change the culture. I go into that organization, I get on their training rotation, teach all employees how to take care of themselves and each other, because they many times will be the first to notice a change in a coworker, whether the coworker admits to it or not. Create internal resources, hence peer teams, and then we identify external resources in the community as culturally competent clinicians that know how you're wired, know your motivation, know how to treat the injury with the intent of getting you back on your feet. That is what I do. Well, let's talk about compassion, because in my belief, when I create this behavioral health program, the foundation is this, right? If we learn how people in crisis are wired at an emergency scene, learn how to help them, we tend to take that back to work and use it with our coworkers. That's been my experience. So we're not going to teach you how to be empathic in here. Right? I'm not going to teach you how to shoulder other people's grief. Absolutely not. Basically, I'm going to teach you to kind of understand and let that person know you understand what they're going through. That's what I'm going to teach you to do. Why should we do this? This comes from Stanford School of Medicine. Stanford School of Medicine wanted to do research on why happy people tended to live longer. That's what started this science. Why is it that happy people live longer? And how do you go about researching that? Well, Stanford School of Medicine decided to look at cellular inflammation. Cellular inflammation in the human being is the root of all evil. Cellular inflammation is a cause of heart disease, cancers, diabetes, everything that can happen to us. Cells become inflamed. Therefore, we can deduce happy people should have low cellular inflammation, right? So we can put science behind this. And they went about to study these populations. And here's what they found. There's a population of people self-described as very happy because they make a lot of money, they live the good life, they fly all over the world in their private jet, and they drive fancy sports cars around, and they're happy. Stanford started to research them and study them, blood draws, brain scans, and what they found was high cellular inflammation. They were not, it was opposite of what they thought was going to happen. They don't live longer than anybody else, if as long. But then they found another population who was self-described as happy because they could be of service to people. And they went about researching that population, and what they found was very, very low cellular inflammation. They began to deduce human beings are placed on earth to be of service to human beings, because when we allow ourselves to do that, we tend to be healthier and live longer. I wrote this book in 2001, and now there's kind of science behind it. Now I can say, there's science that proves that what I've been trying to do for a long time, there's science behind it now. So that's what we're going to do here. So if you make a ton of money and you're happy, you're a hedonic. If you're happy because you are in a job where you truly, every time you meet somebody, you can make a positive impact in their life, you're eudaimomic. Right? Here's what I want. I want you to leave after this class, some of the most tragic scenes you might ever be on, feeling good about what you've done. Because that's what we're going to do today. I want the horrible stuff, you're going to feel good about what you were able to do. There's cellular inflammation simplified for those of you that really want to know what that looks like. In a nutshell, you reach out and you help somebody, you're working off the frontal lobes of your brain. That's where the pleasure sensors are. You'll get the same kind of stuff you get when you eat dark chocolate. Is really what we're going to teach you to do here. Eudaimomic happiness, because you can be of service, triggers pleasure centers in the frontal lobes, lowers depression and anxiety, creates social connectedness, which strengthens immunity, lowers the blood pressure, obesity, smoking, and you just flat will live longer. So I'm going to teach you all how to live longer and truly make an impact in somebody's life. So let's talk about this. This is Justin. Justin was 2 years old. A babysitter put him in the bathtub. She turned the water on, and she left. Eventually, this child is discovered. 911 is called. He gets a fire engine, he gets an ambulance, and he gets a police response to this. While the medics are working on this child, they quickly realized, crap, we know this kid's parents. So while they're doing the resuscitation, one of the firefighters runs to mom and dad's house to let them know something bad is going on. Well, mom and dad were in the process of moving. Dad was in a different community, unpacking boxes. Mom was a few blocks away in the family home, packing boxes, and then family members were in trucks driving stuff back and forth. That's what was going on. Firefighter gets to the house, finds mom. You need to get to the babysitter. Something horrible is going on. And now they come running back together, and now there's a helicopter in kind of a side field there because he's going to be flown to Portland to a pediatric center. As mom tries to get in the house to see what's going on with her child, a very well-meaning young firefighter has posted himself at the front door. And he's going to do what he believes is the right thing to do. And that's prevent mom from seeing the horrible tragedy going inside the house. Well, mom's going to get in the house. Firefighters, no, you're not. You need to get out of my way. No, ma'am, you're not going in there. You do not understand. My son is in that house. No, ma'am, you don't understand. We're busy in there. And Justin's mom is very strong-willed. She's going to get in the house. Firefighter's going to do what he believes is the right thing to do, and he's not going to allow her to traumatize herself. And they begin to wrestle. To the point where not only does she lose her child that day, she's got physical bruises on her body from fighting with a well-meaning young firefighter thinking he was doing the right thing. Now, to make a long story short, and I wrote a book about this, and certainly they're for sale in the bookstore if you're interested. Justin was my son. And it was about a month after this had happened, my wife are driving through the community that we had just moved from. And I knew all the responders there. Coming towards me on the highway is a firefighter that I know. I stick my arm out the window. I'm waving at this guy. And my wife, who was sitting right here, looks at me and she said, "That's the SOB that fought with me when Justin died." And as she shared that story, because I didn't make it to the scene that day, when she shared that story of what happened, and she looked at me, it impacted me a couple ways. Because this is the first time I'd heard this story. Number one, my wife looked at me, "You guys are all just, you're a-holes. Is that what they're teaching you now, is to fight people like me?" And it's like, I don't have an answer for that because I don't know what I would have done. I was never taught. That hurt me a little bit. She thought my profession was bad. I loved my profession. I had the best gig in the world. The second thing that impacted me was this. She's going to remember that day for the rest of her life. And I'm a therapist now. I got all the tricks to move people beyond trauma. I can't take that away from my wife. I can't make her unremember what she experienced that day. So when I finally got back to work, I set about, we got to do business differently here. I called all the universities that were teaching paramedics and the fire schools, and I heard a couple things. There's no room in the curriculum for this kind of touchy-feely stuff, number one. And number two, we don't want our students shouldering everybody's grief. And that's not what we're going to do. All right. So I had just been promoted. I was a company officer now on a fire engine, and so I had the luxury to kind of step back and take a look at the big picture, how we were treating people. And oh my gosh, it was embarrassing. At no fault of ours. At no fault of the young firefighter who encountered my wife. Nobody taught us what we were supposed to do. So that's what we're going to do in the next couple hours, right? So if we're going to understand how people are in crisis, we need to understand how everybody in this room and everybody out there, the majority of them are right now. We're going to call that the steady state. This is stuff you've all heard before. A balance between the two brain systems of emotions and cognitions. Survival brain is the emotional brain. The other part of that is cognitions. Only one of those can be on at a time. Right? We are in a steady state. We're floating around between cognitions and emotions. Right? Somebody cuts you off on the freeway and your emotional brain gets a little higher. I got to put the mic to the side. But one side goes up, it pushes the other down. Hence road rage. For a brief moment, they've lost the ability to process information. They do some crazy stuff. Anybody here from California? No shooting in California. Because, at no fault of theirs, for a brief moment, they've lost the ability to be cognitive. That's how it works, is biology. But we always come back to center. It's a steady state. We're all in there. A crisis is anything that throws us out of balance for a period of time. They're stuck in the emotional brain. All right? First of all, it's always real to the person experiencing it. The crisis that we tend to deal with in the field they're sudden, meaning the person, when they woke up this morning, probably couldn't have predicted this was going to happen. Because it's sudden, the person isn't prepared to handle it. They tend to be short in duration. They tend to not last longer than a few hours, to be totally out of your cognitive brain. And because they're sudden, and because the person isn't prepared, it can produce unacceptable behavior. Why? Because for a brief moment in their life, they've lost the ability to be cognitive. Right? This tends to be what it looks like. So you get some news. You witness something you didn't expect. One of you turn around and give a death notification. And they weren't expecting that. What's the slap in the face emotional thing look like? Well, we're going to call it high anxiety or emotional shock. And it can look different ways. They can be agitated in your face. Remember, it's emotional brain, bouncing off the walls, or they can sit in the chair locked up, because their three choices right now are fight, flight, or freeze. Denial is nothing more than your body going, I can't process this, quit, I'm going to shut you off. Now, it's going to stick, all your information, I'm just not processing it right now. Anger is nothing more than a direct result of being frustrated. And as most humans like to be in control, if something in my life happens that I have to invite complete strangers to help me, that might be frustrating to me. Anger can be a normal response to that. And it's easier said than done, but don't take it personally. They're angry at the situation, not at you. And then remorse, grief, reconciliation, as they try to come up with that new norm, try to come up with what's life going to be like, and kind of get back on their feet. Now, you all in the field, are you going to see people in high anxiety or emotional shock out there in the field, yeah? Are you going to see people in denial out there? Are you going to see angry people out there? Responders, or people that deal with what you do, tend to catch people in the first three phases of this cycle. Now, if you get nothing else out of this afternoon, please get this. When a human being is in these first three phases of an emotional crisis, everything they see, hear, smell, taste, and touch is permanently imprinted for the rest of their life. Everything they see, hear, smell, taste, touch is permanently imprinted for the rest of their life. What you all do in this little window of opportunity can be more important in how that person gets down to here than the mental health care they may get in the months or years down the road. You, in fact, are the ones that have an opportunity to set the stage for how they get here. I don't see people up here anymore. I don't chase ambulances. I don't go out in the field anymore. I usually catch them down here years later. They're stuck someplace. You have an opportunity to set the stage for how they get here. Now, if you're feeling a little pressure, well, number one, good. That means you take your job serious. But what we're going to talk about this afternoon is tools that actually make this stuff quite easy. It's easy, and I don't know why we don't talk about it more. Now, that's Angie there on the bottom left. Angie had just dropped her son off at a local high school, pulling out onto the highway. She got hit on the passenger door and was killed instantly. I was not working that day. I get a page from my boss. He says, "Hey, we got a crew out on a fatal accident. A young woman's been killed. They're waiting for a medical examiner to get there before they extricate the body. Can you just check in on the crew to make sure they're okay?" And I said, "Sure." So I drove out to the scene. It's probably like 7 o'clock in the morning. It's a beautiful morning, and the crew's fine. She was dead when they arrived. There was no intervention other than putting a yellow traffic blanket over her. Now, I'm going to set this scene up a little bit here because it's going to change. Angie was T-boned. Angie was also unrestrained in her vehicle. If the high school is this screen, she's pulling out onto this highway, which goes this way. She's hit. Her car is still facing you. She's now in the passenger seat, and her head has gone through the passenger window. Right? Angie was a beautician. She had just recently put some fire engine red streaks in her hair, and the reason I tell you that is if you knew Angie from across the room, you could see her from behind and go, "Oh, that's Angie." Because that's going to come into play a little later because the firefighters didn't do a really good job in covering the entire body, and her head is sticking out under the blanket. Right? The police have closed this highway off about 200 feet on either side of this accident, and now vehicles and it is this piece of roadway here dumps 5-bedroom communities on our interstate freeway system for commuting into Portland and places like that. It's closed. You got commuters stopping. They're getting out of the car because the road's closed. They're coming up against the roadblocks. You got kids trying to get to school. They're parking their cars. They're coming out, and it's like we're sitting in this arena because literally there's hundreds of people all trying to get a glimpse on what's going on. Danny is at home. He's listening to the morning radio. And an announcement comes on. There's been a fatal accident on State Highway 219 in front of the high school. Take alternative routes to get to your morning commute. You can't get to the freeway that way. And Danny said, my brain went, my wife went that way. I'm going to go check it out. So Angie's car's here. I'm standing with the crew here. They're kind of just shooting the breeze, waiting for the medical examiner. And we see this guy. And he comes underneath the police barricade to our left. Now, Angie is on the right side of her vehicle, on the passenger side. She's facing you. The car's facing you. He gets about 100 foot in that 200-foot journey, and the officer notices him, walks up to him and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" He goes, "That looks like my wife's car." And the officer says, "Well, I'm very sorry, but this highway is closed." He goes, "I know, I get that, but that looks like my wife's car." "Sir, I just told you the highway's closed." "I know, I think that's my wife's car." "Listen, this road is closed. Either you get back up there with everybody else or we will throw you in jail." And he kind of just threw up his hands. And we're all watching this. He threw up his hands and he walks back up. Police officer goes back about his investigation. We watched this guy walk all the way around the scene in the crowd. And the firefighters are going, "Oh, what's he going to do? What's he going to do?" It's probably a 15-minute trip for him. So now he's at the police barricade on this side. He comes underneath the barricade. He starts walking for the car. That's the side of the car his wife's head is sticking out of. He sees the fire engine red streaks in her hair. He screams, "Angie!" And now he's running. And when he screams her name, it startles the officers. They look, they see, he's a big dude, he's running, and you can see them go, "Game on." And within a second, he is on the ground, he's handcuffed, they got a knee in his chest, and somebody's spraying mace all over the place. It's like, are you kidding me? Now, in defense of those officers, this is a stressful scene. A young woman has been killed. That's horrible. Nobody likes to go out on those types of calls. There's a kid in that school right there. Who's going to go pull him out of a classroom and give him the worst news he'll ever hear in his life? None of those folks want to do that either. And sometimes when we have all these stressors going on, let's sterilize the scene. I don't want to deal with anything else. And I understand that. That makes sense. And sometimes that is appropriate. But I got to ask you this. What's more stressful? Throwing this guy on the ground, literally in front of hundreds of people. Thank God this was before cell phones, or there would have been videos all over the place. This was before that. Why he's screaming to get to his wife. Or identifying who he is, give him a minute with his wife to do what he needs to do, and then get support there to get him off the scene. What's more stressful for you? And if you're not sure if that was your wife or your daughter or your sister and you happened upon that, how would you want to be treated? That's what this boils down to. How would you want to be treated if you showed up there? So we have to do business a little differently. And I certainly understand the most traumatic moment in a person's lifetime is the death notification. And I also understand it's not always everybody in this room's responsibility. For some of you, I'm assuming it is your responsibility. For me, it wasn't always my responsibility. But more than once in my career, I do declare a death in the field, and I turn around, and sometimes I didn't even know family was on the scene, but there's somebody there going, hey, what are you doing? How are they doing? And why are you putting your stuff back on your unit? And suddenly I'm in a position. And what I do, what I say, the way I look, is imprinted in that person's life forever. Right? So we got to talk about how we're going to deal with this kind of stuff. So here's what we can do. First of all, we always have choices. Yeah, we can put up the fire line tape. We can keep everybody away. And we'll discuss that today. Sometimes that might be appropriate if safety is involved. Or for police officers if there's been a crime. Absolutely. Don't get me wrong on that. But if we are going to treat people the way we would want to be treated and kind of reach out and have a conversation with them, the first thing I think you should do is you got to take care of yourself. Because it would be really hard for me to engage with somebody who's going through the worst day of their life if I haven't dealt with my own stuff. Now, everybody in this room knows it's easy to deal with our own stuff. All right? So take care of yourself. Convey caring. We can't change every scene. People are going to die. Here's what I can do. I can leave an imprint that I cared. I can leave that imprint. I'm working off my frontal lobes now, and that feels good. And this is all about me. And we'll teach you how to do that. Dose out the bad news. So this elderly couple, this morning, they've been married 50 years. This morning they got up together in their old house. They come down the stairs together. Grandpa heads out to the mailbox to get the morning newspaper. Grandma heads to the kitchen, starts to prepare breakfast. Grandpa brings the paper in, sits next to her in the kitchen, starts reading her the morning news. Breakfast is ready. They sit down at the table together. They eat. Then they talk about what the day is going to bring. They've been doing that for 50 years. Except this morning, there's a thump on the table. Grandma looks at where the dining room table is, and Grandpa's done a face plant. He's out. She shakes him. He's unresponsive. There happens to be a phone on the wall right there. She picks it up, and she calls you. If you're all first responders now. She calls you. You're dispatched. Your dispatcher's trying to give this woman pre-arrival instructions, but she's locked up. You get there, she's still locked to the phone. Any paramedics in here? So it's been a while since I've been a paramedic, but I'm going to assume you're going to walk into that room, open up the airway, and check for a pulse. Yeah, we still do that? And you're going to find none. You're going to pull him out of the chair. You're going to lay him on his back on the floor. You're going to start an intervention. Why you do that? Somebody needs to look at this woman, which means we're going to let her stay in this room unless she interferes with what we're doing. That's her right. This is her house. One of us needs to look at her and say, ma'am, your husband's heart's not beating. He is not breathing. And now we're going to start. I go back to work. Now she's got a dose. And if you could look into her head, you'd see the gears start to spin on, what did they just say? What does that mean? And even to an elderly woman, what does that mean? No heartbeat, not breathing. That's not good, is it? So you magical medics, you're going to put patches on this guy or quick look, however you do it. You're going to find fine VFib, so a very fine little squiggle line, and we're going to give him a dose of electricity. And we shock this gentleman into a systole or flat line. Is that good or bad? See, the rule of thumb is more squiggle, not less, right? We shock him into no squiggle. We should look at this woman, and now we're going to immediately start CPR. We're going to look at her and say, ma'am, your husband's heart did not respond to electricity. Now back to work. She's got no heartbeat, not breathing, didn't respond to electricity. And you know what? On TV, they always respond to electricity, right? So we're doing CPR. The medics, we're going to get a tube into his lungs to secure the airway. We're going to get a line into a vein to start giving cardiac medications. We might be 20 minutes into this, and it's still asystolic. He's flatlined. One of us should look at this woman. Ma'am, your husband's heart is not responding to any of the medications. It's a dose. Now, the first county that I was employed in, we had to consult a physician before we would declare a death in the field when I first started in the 70s. Which I got to tell you made it easier for me to do this. Because if I'm a half hour into this and I don't think this is going to be successful, I can say, ma'am, if we don't see a change here pretty quick, I'm going to have to call a hospital. I'm going to talk to a doctor, and that doctor is going to determine whether we should continue or whether we should stop. And I got to tell you, that made it kind of easy on me because I could talk to the doc. What have we done? What's things going on? And I can hang up the phone and look at her and say, I am so sorry, but your husband is dead. The county that I retired from, which was a department that covered 4 counties, those medical examiners relied on the paramedics to be able to make that decision on their own. So if I'm a half hour, 40 minutes into this, and we just know this isn't going to be successful, I might look at this woman and say, your husband's not responding to any of our intervention. We might have to start thinking of whether we should continue or whether we should stop. And the thing is, if we decide to call a death in the field, and you turn to her and say, I am so sorry, but your husband has died. What was the intent of dosing out the bad news? You're preparing her. You're not getting a slap in the face, high anxiety, emotional shock, sad, absolutely. But she was there. She knew her husband was dead when we walked in the door because we were given those doses. And it helps prepare them, absolutely. They will be, you'll get sadness, but you tend to soften that high anxiety stuff that can happen if you dose out the news. You have to be truthful. Because everything they see, hear, smell, taste, and touch is permanently imprinted. You tell them a little white lie, they may not pick up on it then. They will eventually figure that out, and then all firefighters, all chaplains, all law enforcement are liars. Because that's just the way it works. If you haven't figured this out yet, what I do is based on experience. So, this truthful thing. I got hooked up with a group in Portland called Parents of Murdered Children after I lost my son. It is a group that meets every month in somebody's home. And once you're a member of the club, you're a lifetime member of the club. And so my first visit there was parents that had just lost children, like in the last week, and parents that lost kids 30 years ago at the hands of another. And because once you're a member, you're always a member. I am now doing research on my books. This is a few years after my son lost his life. I want to know about that day. What can we do better? So we've got the chairs in a circle. Obviously, it's very emotional because they can pull up second by second by second of what that day was like. So it's very emotional. There's a lady sitting across from me. Everybody's tearing up when the first person started to talk. Gets to be her turn. And she goes, well, 10 years ago, I got that 3 o'clock in the morning knock on the door. That dreaded 3 o'clock in the morning knock on the door. And she says, I'm a single mom. I answered the door. As a young gentleman standing there, identified himself as a fire department chaplain, said, ma'am, there's been a horrible accident. And it's difficult for me to have to tell you, but your daughter is dead. And she's trying to figure out what happened. He asked if he could come in. She says, I let this guy in my house. We're sitting on the couch. He's trying to support me, but I can't tell you what's going on in my head because it's not present. She says, about 15 minutes after the chaplain got there, there's a knock on the door. She says, I answer it. There's a police officer standing there who just walks in my house. And then another one. And then another one. She says, pretty soon I got 3 officers in my house, and they're asking me questions about my daughter that don't make sense. And she finally goes, time out. Can somebody tell me what the hell's going on here? And one of the officers goes, well, didn't he tell you your daughter's boyfriend blew her head off with a shotgun? He didn't tell you that? She says, I look at this chaplain, because in her mind, what had happened? What had he done? This was no accident. This was a brutal murder. He lied to me. She said, I made a fist. I hit him in the face as hard as I could. I took him out. And then she goes, that was 10 years ago. If I leave this home and he's out in the front yard, I'll take him out again. He lied to me. In defense of that chaplain, probably doing a 3 o'clock in the morning walk up a sidewalk to deliver horrible news. He's probably thinking, how do I make this easy on this woman? And how do I make it easy on who else? So what could he have done differently that would have changed everything in her life? Knocked on the door, identified himself, and said, ma'am, there's been a horrible tragedy. And it is. It pains me to have to tell you, but your daughter has died. And what I have found dosing out news in adults is when you give them a dose that they weren't expecting, they will disengage from you a moment. They will disengage eye contact. Sometimes they look away while their brain's trying to process what they just heard. And when they're ready for the next dose, they'll either re-engage eye contact or they will ask, what happened? They will ask a question. And when an adult asks you a question, they deserve an honest answer. Chances are she would have said, what happened? He could have probably said, it appears she may have been shot. Well, who? Where? He could have probably honestly said, ma'am, I do not have all that information. In a little while, there'll be some police officers coming to the house, and maybe they can help us fill in the story. But right now, what can I do to support you? It would have been a very different outcome, right? Give permission to grieve. Because early on in my career, we were removing people from rooms when they were grieving because that bothered us. We got to get them out of here, move them out of the room. I don't want to hear that. That was the wrong thing to do, by the way. And so I had to learn that, listen, this is between this loved one and the person that I'm working on. It's not between them and me and this love. I got to get that. That's okay. That's normal for them. Let them do it. Another thing I had to learn was to offer continuing support. Early in my career, one of my first dues was a retirement community. And it would not be uncommon, as people wake up in their old age, they have their heart attacks in the mornings, typically. They sit on the toilet, they push down, they bear down, they get a Valsalva maneuver, it stops the heart, and that's where they drop. It would not have been uncommon in my first due to work 4 or 5 cardiac arrests a morning. When you work 4 or 5 cardiac arrests in the morning, you tend to run out of medical examiners and deputy medical examiners. And you can call dispatch, we have a death in the field, respond to deputy medical examiner. And some days they might say, copy that, ETA on a deputy is 2 to 3 hours. Me being young, naive, thinking I got a paycheck to fight fire and save lives, not sit with dead people, would put my unit back into service and leave sometimes. And I feel horrible about that, but I didn't know. And here's what I had to learn to do. If I can't get resources there quickly, I am going to sit with the survivors. Is there somebody that I can get a hold of that you would feel comfortable sitting with? Is there a neighbor that you would trust? Is there family members close by? Do you belong to a church? Is there somebody from your church I can get a hold of for you? You know what? The fire department has chaplains who would be happy to come and sit and help you through this. And if I can get none of those, then my unit is out of service and I'm staying with them. And all my fire chiefs, once we put this together, said, nope, you're out of service, stay there. Because that's the right thing to do. All right? This is the very first call that I put this into practice. Literally cognitive, this happened. All right, let's try this. Let's see how it works. This was middle of January. Now, how many of you are familiar with where Oregon is at? In Oregon, there's this thing called the Willamette Valley, right? That's where the most of the population live. Portland, Salem, Eugene are all in the Willamette Valley, so that's where the most of the population is. Guess what the Willamette Valley is like in January typically? Just a guess. I'll tell you. It's cold, it's wet, it's not cold enough to snow, it's just cold enough to be cold and wet, and it's horrible, and it's gray all day long, and it sucks. All right? That's why when you get to be my age and you get tired of that, you go to Arizona or wherever during that.
So you can see the yellow ball in the sky.
Yes, absolutely. You know what? This day I woke up, I'm going to go to work this day, the sun is out. I've lived in Oregon my entire life. And for an Oregon kid to wake up in January and the sun is out, this is going to be the best day ever. Now it's cold, don't get me wrong. It's like 20 degrees. Cold. It's dry. It's chapstick weather. Cold and dry. I will take that over gray and wet any day. I got to work. We planned the day with my crew, make sure that apparatus is polished up, shiny. We're going to get outside, we're going to drive around, we're going to wave at children, and we are going to live the dream. It's going to be the best day ever. And that day, an 18-year-old girl leaves work, and she drives her car home to have lunch with her parents. After lunch, she gets back in her vehicle, is heading back to work. Now, I don't know if you can see in this photograph here, this power pole is a little lower than the rest. And for those of you that don't know, these are hop poles. So we are in rural Oregon, where hops are where they make beer from. So it's agriculture area. Out of that dip in that lady's lane is an intoxicated driver in a pickup truck. Now she's driving a little Porsche 944. He's driving a pickup truck. If you count the lug nuts on the Porsche and you count the lug nuts on the pickup truck, who has more? Who's got more lug nuts? The pickup truck has more lug nuts, right? So who's going to win this fight? Because I don't know if they still teach us, he or she with the most lug nuts is going to win, right? You take that pickup truck and you ram it into a semi, who's got more lug nuts? Now, who's going to win? You take that semi and you put it in front of a train, who's going to win? The train's got more lug nuts. That's easy to remember. She did everything right. She was safety belted in. And I will tell you this, when he popped out of that ditch, there's not a skid mark on that highway. Neither one had a chance to touch a brake. They just hit. He, not a scratch on him, not a mark on this dude. She, safety belted in, did everything right, is dead. Now, she's not dead. She's gasping for breaths 2 times a minute, which is not survivable. She's got a heart rate of 6 beats a minute, and they're non-functioning heart rhythm. We call that an agonal rhythm. We are 45 minutes by ground here to the nearest hospital, and it is not a trauma center. In the early 80s, when this photograph was taken, helicopters do not fly deceased people. They're not going to take a helicopter out of service. And that sounds sad and it sounds calloused. They don't take helicopters out of service for trauma codes because they're not survivable. She's got everything going against her. Now, she is my only patient. I got a lot of resources there. We did what you folks would probably do. We pulled her out of the car, and we are going to work on her until she goes completely asystolic, flatline, until she completely quits breathing. We're going to give it a shot. This was one of my first jobs, so I'm talking to the doc at the ER. This is what we got. This is what we're doing. And the doctor said, stop. She's dead. All right? I just declared a death in the field. I looked up. We haven't even had a chance to close the road yet. I looked up, and here comes an elderly man and woman with 2 kids in tow. And it happens to be her parents who heard the collision, and they want to see what's going on. And that's why I'm going, this is my first opportunity to actually try to do something right. Right? Now, first, also understand this. When I say here comes an elderly man and woman, they were probably younger than I am now. Right? I walked up to him and I said, can I help you with something? Right? Because that's how I identify who should be allowed in and who's not. And listen, there's not a lot of Porsche 944s in that neck of the woods. They saw the car. They saw the girl laying there. They said, that's our daughter. I said, stay right here. I'll be right back. Because people in crisis will respond to directions. I ran up to this police agency working this call. I said, listen, it's my organization's belief that if loved ones show up where another loved one's been seriously injured or died, they should have the right to come up and say goodbye where the body is. With your permission, right over there is mom and dad. Is it okay if I bring them up, let them have a few moments with their daughter, and then I will make sure I get support here and get them off the scene? Are you guys okay with that? And they said, yeah. They're probably thinking, if you deal with them, sweet, do it. And I'm okay with that. But I got permission. Why was that? Well, it's different. That, yes. Listen, this is
You're seen as it's a rescue as soon as
it's a crime. It is, absolutely. Thank you. Listen, as crazy as Oregonians are, and we're crazy, that's why I like it there. We're nuts. We are very weird in Oregon. I love that. As crazy as we are, we can all collectively agree on one thing in that state. We will not tolerate a drunk driver killing somebody. I want that dude to go to jail for the rest of his life. That won't happen, but and I don't want to screw that up. So I do. Outside of the home, I always get permission if law enforcement is there. I don't want to mess that stuff up. This case, they said, you may bring the family up. I went back to mom and dad, and I said something to the extent of, I am so sorry, but your daughter's dead. Now, if you'd like to go up there and spend a few minutes with her, we will allow that. But I need to tell you, this is what you're going to see, right? And I'm giving them a death notification. I'm also giving them some doses. When we pulled up, your daughter was still safety belted in her car. I mean, it looks like she's done everything right. But when we got here, she didn't have a heartbeat. She wasn't breathing. We pulled her out of the car. We opened up her blouse so we could start trying to get her heart going. We put a tube in her lungs so we could breathe for her, and we stuck a needle in her arm to give her heart something to pump. And I'm so sorry that she died, but if you go up there, that's still on the body. You're also going to see some blood around the mouth and the nose, but and some bruising on the chest. Not only from the safety belt, but us trying to get her heart started. But it's your choice. And what do you suppose they chose? Oh, absolutely. 100% of the time, you give a parent a choice to be with their child, not only will they accept it, they will push you out of the way. That's their child. And up they came. And they actually brought little brother and sister up as well. Remember, it's 20 degrees outside. One of my firefighters had just pulled one of those beautiful yellow traffic blankets off the apparatus. Dad took it away from him, unfolded it, got on his hands and knees, and he started tucking his daughter in. Now, that was not easy to watch. I'm not having fun. As a matter of fact, because this was my first attempt to do this, I am thinking to myself, I don't like this. Remember, when I went to work, this was going to be our best day. I'm not sure I'm doing this right. I'm not sure I like this. I'm not sure I'm doing it right by telling you guys you should be doing this, because this isn't fun anymore. That was hard. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to come back to this in a little bit because this scene flipped. It flipped. We felt it. We actually left this feeling really good. If you can imagine that, leaving this feeling good. So, but I'll be honest with you right now. No, I don't think I like this. All right? A good death notification and nothing changes. A bad one and everything changes. And you see where I got that quote. Does that make sense to you? If I was to do an interview in the community you come from and say, give me maybe the 5 top most respected professions in this community, what do you suppose I would hear? Is there firefighters in the room? Come on. Who's the most respected occupation out there? Thank you. Firefighters, what was the other one? Absolutely. Law enforcement. Who else is way up on the list? Military, absolutely. Doctors, teachers. I'm a little biased. I think firefighters ought to be at the top. That's me. Right? Listen, when my apparatus pulls up in the front of your house, I want you running outside screaming, thank God you're here. I like that. So let's say I do everything right. I'm caring. They still lost their loved one. Nothing's changed. Let's say I do something perceived as uncaring. I am not uncaring. It would have to be perceived. A poor choice of words. Maybe one of you we're coming up to support this, and maybe we're going to go fishing when I get off duty in the morning. I come out, oh man, I'm glad to see. I can't wait till morning, and I'm doing this, and the family's watching that. So it's perceived. Not my intent to hurt the family. But I do something perceived as uncaring. Not only do they lose their loved one that day, I also take away the most respected occupation in their community. To the extent of they might think twice next time they need help about calling me because they've done that. No, I don't care. And I think that's the tragedy, because now I'm taking away their resources. All right? So we got to figure out how to do this. So here's some things perceived as uncaring. Now, please, if you've said some of these things, don't feel bad. I have said some of these things because I didn't know what else to say. Nobody taught me. They're all said with the intent to provide comfort. The ones up here that I didn't say, I happen to be witness to. And I'm going to guess you have your own experiences that we could talk about this list all day long. But let's talk about this. When somebody's in crisis, we don't say, I know how you feel, even if you do. It doesn't work. And here's another one. These are almost identical. I understand even if you do. I'm going to assume there's other people that have had personal losses in this room. All right. But we all have a different history. Let's say I was a widower. I am not. I've been married to my wife for 40 years. Let's say she died in a car wreck 5 years ago. I am watching Danny try to get to Angie. And maybe he gets thrown down, maybe he doesn't, but I see he's really upset because they're not letting him buy the body. And I walk up to him, maybe put my hand on his shoulder and say, hey man, I understand, or I know how you feel. I lost my wife a few years ago in a crash. Certainly said with the intent to provide comfort. But maybe that morning, Danny and Angie had gotten a little fight. And he had called her some horrible, horrible names as she left. He's trying to get to her to apologize. And here I come and say, hey, I understand. He's going to look at me like, you are an idiot. You haven't a clue what I'm going through right now. And you know what? He would be right. So it doesn't work when somebody's in crisis. All right? You shouldn't feel that way. Well, that's the only part of the brain that's engaged right now. And who am I to decide what's normal or not for you? All right? So that tends to not to work. You're so strong. Remember fight, flight, freeze. Not always, but in most cases, it's a guy. Somebody they love is seriously injured or is dying or is dead. They never got the lesson in life. What are you supposed to do when your wife dies? They didn't get that lesson, and sometimes they lock up because they don't know what to do. They've been taught very young, you don't emote, you don't show feelings, that you got to be strong, on and on and on. And there they sit. They sit right in that chair right there, just locked up. And whether we're going to transport their loved one or not, as I walk out the door with my kid, I'll give them a pat on the shoulder. Hey, man, thanks for being strong for us. Because really what I'm saying is, thanks for sitting in that chair and not getting in my way, and thanks for not crying, because when a guy cries, yeah. Right? That's what I'm saying. The thing is, now, in my private practice, I get them years later, they're caught in the grief process. And if that was said to them, it's going to come out, followed by, those responders are idiots, aren't they? This firefighter congratulated me on how strong I was. Man, I was fighting for every breath. My life was upside down. I wasn't sure I wasn't going to die. And they told me how strong I was. They don't get it, do they? Right? That's what I hear. So it tends not to work. You must get on with your life. And what's that asking somebody to do? Move forward or back? Yeah, let's move on, right? Yeah? Well, let me ask you this. Somebody in crisis will only accept one thing from me, and I can't give them that. And what's that? Turn the clock back to when he was still reading me the morning newspaper. That's the only thing that woman would have accepted from me. I can't do that. But if that's the only thing she'll accept from me, how successful am I going to be trying to push her in the exact opposite way? See, it just doesn't make sense to them. You'll get over it. Well, in my experience, people don't want to get over it. Because when I hear that word, listen to the gentleman, the lie, the closure thing. You don't want to get over it. Those are memories. And when I hear get over it, I hear that to me, I'm thinking, wow, am I supposed to throw away all pictures that my child ever exists? Because that's what I hear. So it tends not, where people don't want to get over it, right? So that's not helpful. If you only had. Well, see, in my profession, I'm going to assume there's law enforcement in the room as well. You're going to see people, unrestrained motorists, die in completely survivable accidents. You're going to see kids unrestrained, even though there's stickers all over the front seat of a car, put them in the back seat backwards, or the airbags can be damaging to them. You're going to see kids getting taken out by airbags. You're going to see minivan doors fly up on the freeway and kids fall out and log trucks drive over them. You're going to see families die in an apartment house fire because the smoke detector battery is in some toy someplace. And you're going to be interviewing the family when you declare death in the field. When did the chest pain start? Well, it started about 10 hours ago, but we didn't want to bother you. You just want to go, if you would have called us 10 hours ago, you probably would have been having dinner with them tonight. And I have to say, resist that. Most folks will figure that out on their own. In Oregon, if you don't, the media will help you figure that out. Because if you are unrestrained, because we have a very strict law there, if you are unhelmeted and you're younger than 16, if you have your smoke detector disengaged, that makes front page news as a lesson to everybody else. Right? Who's the most respected occupation out there? It's us. Let's stay there. Let them go after the media. The media are the jerks. Right? Is there anybody from the media in here? I'm sorry. Anybody? We all good? All right. Your anguish is not going to bring them back. Obviously not. But why? So why say it? Again, all said with the intent to provide comfort. They led a good life. And you know what? What a wonderful thing to say at a funeral. Absolutely. Not a wonderful thing to say when they're still on the kitchen floor. Right? At a funeral, they're not in crisis. They're sad, but it's not crisis. Don't question God's will. Chaplain's in here, yeah? Where? Where are you? Sweet! Right? No, you don't agree with that. Yeah. Here's the thing. I could tell you what God's will is when it comes to death and dying because I know. The thing is, while we're all in a steady state, we may or may not agree. So how successful am I going to be when one of us is in crisis trying to get us to agree? So my rule of thumb is I will not put my personal beliefs on anybody in crisis. I just won't. Now, if they want to have that conversation, tell me about your beliefs. Absolutely, I will track them there. If they really want to get in depth, I get the God guys and gals there because that's what they do, not me. Right? Okay, so be careful putting your personal beliefs on somebody when they're in crisis, all right? You'll find somebody else. Now, hang on. Is there wood in here? Because it wasn't me that said this, thank God. But I was there when it was said, and I got to tell you, it impacted me enough. I can pull that scene up second by second by second. It was one of those. So, 29-year-old guy dies eating breakfast in the morning in the kitchen. 29-year-old guy. He's been married 1 year to a 29-year-old woman. We're working this guy. He's got absolutely no history of heart disease, congenital problems. We are working him. Again, I started my career in rural Oregon, so to speak. It's long transport times. So for medical emergencies, we tend to stay on the scene a little longer because the medication that we were giving him is the exact same medication that the emergency department would give him. And if it's not working here, it ain't going to work at the emergency department. Let's give him the shot here. I mean, I'm on the phone with the docs going, this guy's 29 years old. And we've probably been on the scene probably a half hour, 45 minutes. It's my engine company, and it's a private provider medical unit, an ambulance. Here's what I remember. Got a paramedic from the ambulance in charge of the airway. The guy's on his back. Got a paramedic from the ambulance on the guy's left arm pushing cardiac meds. Have one of my firefighters pulling medications out of the drug box, giving it to the paramedic as requested. My other firefighter is doing chest compressions on this guy, and me, the company officer, is standing over his right shoulder with a clipboard documenting everything we're doing. So we can keep track of medications and times and things like that. I remember the wife coming down the stairs with an armload of stuff her husband's going to need at the hospital, and she never got the lesson in what you're supposed to take. She's got jammies and slippers and razors and shampoo and pillows and sleeping bags. It looks like they're going camping for a week. And she walks in the kitchen with this armload of stuff of her husband's things she's going to take to the hospital. I remember the medic at the airway looked up at her and said, "Don't worry, sweetheart, you'll find somebody else." Silence, because it was like, my crew, we all just kind of went, I'm assuming it was said with the intent to provide comfort. I'm assuming it was said meaning you are 29 years old. You've got a lot of life ahead of you. Chances are you will find somebody else that you fall in love with that you could spend the rest of your life with. I'm assuming that's what's the intent behind that. I think the problem was the timing was just wrong because we're still working on this guy. That was the problem. So I've never talked to that wife. I don't imagine she found much comfort in that. Be thankful you have other kids. Now, I got to tell you, I heard this a ton because people just don't know what to say. Here's been my experience. When you have friends and you lose a child, half of them disappear because they don't know what to say. The other half say this because they don't know what to say. My first station assignment was across the street from a retirement community. It was a totally intact senior citizen community, their own shopping center, golf clubs, theater, they had everything, their own water sources, inside of a bigger intact city. But they were part of my first use. We were out there a lot. Every Thursday morning, about 600 of those people would gather in their clubhouse for Thursday morning coffee klatch. Right, they'd have coffee and donuts. They would invite community members in. Business people would come in to try to sell them their wares. Then they would have, neighborhood associations get up and bitch about the government, bitch about taxes, when the next bus to the casino is taken off, and that kind of stuff. I worked a 24-48 shift, so every third day I was at work for 24 hours, which means every third day, which means every third Monday, every third Tuesday, every third Wednesday I work. When my shift fell on the Thursday morning coffee class, so every third Thursday, I would try to get on their agenda, and they would give me 20 minutes. And I would take my fire engine out there with my crew. The first 10 minutes, because I was on their schedule a bit, I would do stand-up comedy, believe it or not. Stupid old people jokes. I find a lot of humor in that. My wife hates my sense of humor, hates it. These people laughed. This was my crowd. I literally felt like Jay Leno. I had a blast. I look forward to Thursday. I get to be a stand-up comedian. So I do 10 minutes of stand-up comedy, get them all rolling in the aisles, and then I do 10 minutes of, this is what my fire departments can do for you this month. We will change your smoke detector batteries. We replace furnace filters. Every fire engine where I worked, we created a little check sheet. If you are retired, you can call us. We will come to your house, do a complete top-to-bottom home safety inspection. Secure your rugs so you're not falling and breaking hips, getting your head caught between the toilet and the tub. Who's the firefighters out here? Did they do that where you work? They get their head caught between the toilet and the tub? Man, all the time. And that's not easy getting them out. So let's prevent that. And that's what I would do. Right? Every third Thursday, that's what they would get. What we can do for you. Now, my motivation for going out there was they laughed at my stupid sense of humor. I had a blast. My boss's motivation was what? Yeah, who votes? See, in Oregon, we do not have a sales tax. Everything's property tax supported. Property taxes are not cheap. Even a 10 cent per thousand raise in property taxes could make the difference of whether they stayed in their home or not, which is really sad. My boss figured out that if you could get the senior vote, even if Oregon's a mail-in ballot, so when they are spending the winter in Arizona, they still get to vote. It's vote by mail. They all vote. And the thing is, it doesn't matter what the rest of the city voted. If you could get 100% of the retired vote, ha ha ha. Every levy, every bond we floated, those people passed for us. They loved us. The reason I even bring that up, when my son was killed, I took some time off and I missed a Thursday morning coffee clutch. So when I got back to work, I was getting ready to re-engage with all that stuff. I took my crew out to the senior states clubhouse, and I sat down with an 80-something-year-old woman who scheduled the calendar. I told her why I had to miss the last one, and she goes, "You got other children?" I said, "Yeah, I got one other son." And she goes, "You know what? I had 5 children." And she says, "When my number 3 boy was 5 years old, he died." And she didn't share how he died, but I'm sitting there thinking, she's like 85, 86-ish. This is probably a few years ago, I'm assuming. She goes, "You'd be amazed at the number of people that came to me and told me to be thankful I have other children." And she says, "Even after all these years, that never ever made sense to me." She says, "Listen, I love my number 3 boy as much as 1 and 5 and 2 and 4. And she says, "I'll be honest with you, I had 5 children because I wanted 5 children." I get where this comes from. I have not lost an only child. I can't imagine what that would be like. I can't imagine. That would be horrible. So I understand why people say it. The thing is, if you take that literally, that woman that schedules a Thursday morning coffee clutch could lose 3 more children and still be thankful. You still got 1 left, be thankful. Here's been my experience. Parents will figure that out on their own. Right? They don't need other people telling them that. All right? So they don't find comfort in it. All right? It would have been worse if to them it's real. And it's not always, it's when they're in crisis. It doesn't always have to be dead people. But don't try to soften it. "Oh, ma'am, you think this is bad? You should have saw where we were at earlier today." That doesn't help them. All right, it's real to them. Be compassionate. Treat them the way you want your family treated. Let's come back to this. So I'm sitting there watching this guy tuck his daughter in, and he's crying, and it's like, oh, this is tough. And now he reaches under her and he picks her up. And I said, "Sir, what are you doing?" He goes, "Well, she comes home with me." I said, "I don't think you can do that." I said, "Just wait just a minute." I noticed a motion for a police officer who came over and said, "Dad wants to take his daughter home." And these officers are going, being very nice. "Sir, you can't do that." And he says, "Well, you don't understand my beliefs." Now, is anybody in here familiar with what we in Oregon call old believer Russians? Yeah. Old believer, we call them that. They escaped communist Russia in the 40s and 50s. They're Christians. They're Christian Orthodox people. Under communist rule, you can't practice your faith. So their churches went underground. The party sought them out and would kill them. Well, this is no good. Let's get out of the country. Party would kill them at the borders. Some escaped. They got into South America, migrated north, and a large population of them settled in Oregon's Mid-Willamette Valley. Why? I don't know, other than they are amazing farmers. The Mid-Willamette Valley in Oregon has what we call sandy loam soil. This remote, I could drill this into my backyard, and by morning it will have sprouted. That's how fertile the soil is. I'm assuming that word got out and that's where they settled. Now, my dad and I used to farm. That population, old believer Russians, can grow on 10, 20 acres what a corporate farmer would take 100. And their product will be better, will be sweeter, it's better, and it's all done by hand because this community, they're out there every day. They just tend to their stuff. It's like, oh my gosh. All right. They still wear the traditional clothing of their faith. So by me telling you that story, that they escaped communist rule, how trusting do you suppose they are of government? Because here's what's going to happen. The officer said, sir, you can't take your child home. And he keeps going, you don't understand my beliefs. And the officers, they're trying to be very compassionate. Sir, but you can't do that. And finally said, it's the law. She belongs to the state of Oregon. Yeah, whoops. Because see, where he come from, you do as I say, or in fact, we will kill you. He escapes to the free world where he finds out, your daughter dies, we get it, the government gets her. Now, and he's upset, and really rightfully so. I'm the guy that wrote the damn book. I don't know what to say. And I hadn't finished the book yet. I don't know what to say to this guy. I mean, I don't. He is, you don't understand my beliefs. And it's like, oh man, this is sad. Well, I got a chaplain to the scene. And this is her right here. She finally just looks at this guy and says, hey, tell me about your beliefs. And that emotional brain, suppressed, because to tell about beliefs, you got to get into the cognitive brain. It shifted the scene. Literally, you felt it. And he looks at her and says, here is our beliefs. When a loved one dies, the body gets taken home. The body is bathed, there's a religious rite, and they're put in the ground same day. And in Oregon, if you get them in the ground same day, you don't have to embalm them. That's what he needs to do with his daughter. Well, that makes sense. I hear that the police are on the phone with the medical examiner. This is back when the phones are big bricks, right? And he's probably still 10, 15 minutes out, and I hear him yelling, don't let him take the body, for crying out loud. And so we're just trying to, and the chaplain's doing an amazing job. And not that it would always, but it changed the whole dynamic of the scene. It just did. And not that it would always happen. The medical examiner never hung up the phone. He knew exactly what was happening his entire drive out. He gets there. He identifies himself to the family, asks if we can pull the family back a little bit. He says, can I get like 10, 15 minutes with their daughter? And absolutely. He comes back to the family after 15 minutes and he says, there's no doubt what happened here. You can take her home. I thought, oh, are you kidding me? Really? I grabbed the firefighter. I said, get a camera off the apparatus. And this was a film camera. Take some photographs, because literally we felt a shift. We felt it. I said, I want to remember this. Because when we got back to this firehouse, that police organization, which is a different police organization than that other call we talked about, they stopped by the firehouse. They don't normally do that. Hey, I don't know what you guys did, but that was pretty cool. The private provider ambulance, who often doesn't stop by the firehouse, stopped by and said, that was pretty amazing what happened back there. Now, I was teaching this class in Chicago a long time ago, about 1989-ish. I had just told this story, and in the back of the room was a crotchety, grouchy old firefighter. I think I woke him up on this story. I think he worked for Chicago Fire 85, 86 years. And he goes, hey, and he's way in the back. I said, yes, sir. He goes, I bet your incidents of stress debriefings have gone through the roof, all that touchy-feely crap you guys are doing out in Oregon. And I said, well, that's a great question. And I reflected back on this day, and I said, well, let me respond. Well, we don't do debriefings. Because, see, we left this scene feeling good about what we were able to accomplish. You don't debrief what feels good. Now, did we go back to the firehouse and talk about it? Yeah, it was sad. We talked about it. Did we need to do a debriefing? No. And if you think about the Stanford School of Medicine report, we were working off our frontal lobes. We didn't know what we were doing back then, but it worked. We left that we knew we'd done what we could, left the imprint that we cared. That feels good. Tragedy, yes. We did what we could. Okay, that feels good. You don't brief what feels good. So here's what we started to do. Family members, we identify them if they do show up at the scene. It's as easy as, excuse me, can I help you with something? And you hear one of two things. That's my wife. That's my son. Okay, come with me. And as we're walking up, and we'll talk about that, but they have the right to be up there. I'm going to tell them exactly what they're going to be, and if they interfere, then they can't stay there anymore. If I hear, excuse me, can I help you? Yeah, I'm just getting late. I'm trying to get to the mall because that sale is going to end soon. If I hear that, I'll say, oh, man, whoa, you are right. You're going to cut it close. I tell you what, you get back in your vehicle. And when that car in front of you starts to move forward, you go ahead and follow them. I'm being facetious. But you get those goofballs. It's all about them. All right. These are brothers to the lady on this backboard. If she's conscious and we're telling her everything that we're doing, her family is hearing what we're doing, and they know their sister's getting the best care she can possibly get in that particular organization. If she is unconscious, then we will tell them what we're doing. And again, they know their sister's getting the best care. And let me ask you this. If she's conscious or she wakes up and she opens her eyes and she sees her brothers there, do you think she might find some comfort in that? They're not getting in our way. That's their sister. They have every right to be there. All right, so that's what we started to do. I was heading to my office one day, and there was a head-on collision. That vehicle, the other vehicle that caused the collision, is off camera. The gentleman in that pickup truck is alive. He's trapped. He's hurt bad. And he gets a hold of his phone, and he picks it up, and he calls his wife. He doesn't call 911. Hey, sweetheart, I've been in a horrible accident. I'm trapped. This is where I'm at. Thank God somebody called 911. So the fire apparatus gets there. My vehicle is just off camera back here, but as I pull up, this Jeep just is skidding. I'm waiting for impact, but they don't hit me. They throw it in park while it's still moving, and they come running around, and it's this gal right there. And I said, stop. Can I help you with something? She says, my husband's in that truck. I just talked to him on the phone. Okay, stay right here. People in crisis will take direction. Stay right here. Went to the company officer, who's the incident commander. Now, this is my organization, so I don't have to say, listen, it's my organization. But I said, hey, Lieutenant, I got the wife back there. If I keep her with me, it's okay if I bring her forward. I looked at the scene, went back to the wife. Here's the thing. Your husband's still trapped in the truck. Now, if you'd like to go up there, we will allow that, but you got to stay with me. I mean, you have to stay with me. You get away from me, and then we got to pull you back. And she's going, yeah, I want to go up there. Okay, here's the thing. This is what you're going to see. He's still trapped in the truck. He doesn't look very comfortable. He's hurt. He's got a lot of blood on his face. You're going to hear a lot of noise because they're using equipment to try to get him out right now. So that's why we got to stand back. All right? And I'm explaining all that to her. That's her right there in the jeans and the dark coat. Because here's the thing. If somebody doesn't stand there and explain what's going on with her, including why we can't get closer, what's she going to do if somebody doesn't identify who she is? Where's she going to go? She's going to get in your way because she wants to make sure you're taking care of her husband. Pretty soon you're restraining her. Identify them, and even if I didn't show up and it was just the crew, one of them can say, excuse me, can I help you? That's my husband. Ma'am, stand right over there. We'll give you information as we get it. Stand right there. And she will do that. Right? Recognize them and have a conversation with them. Now, this scene is kind of muddled a little bit because here was the thing. It's probably 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. A couple in their 40s. The wife walks to the grocery store. She's going to go grocery shopping. In her absence, he goes into the man cave that he's built in the back of the garage. He drinks an entire bottle of wine, lights a cigarette, gets in a great big overstuffed chair. He dozes off. The cigarette drops into the cushion of the chair, and we respond on a room and contents fire. Room and contents man fire. We didn't know it was a man fire until we got there. So firefighters, enter the building. They find him. They pull him out. And they're working. This guy's burnt really bad, and we're working him. He's going to die. He's got just non-survivable burns. But we're working him because his heart's still beating. Right? While we were doing the resuscitation attempt, a lady carrying 2 bags of groceries comes up to the fire line tape, and a young firefighter says appropriately, "Ma'am, can I help you with something?" She says, "Yeah, that's my house. Where's my husband?" And he just turns around because I'm on, he goes, "Hey, Dietz!" So I walk over there. "Yes, what can I help you with?" She says, "This is my house. Where's my husband?" All right. So I said, "Well, we responded here because one of your neighbors saw smoke coming out of your garage. When the firefighters went into the garage to put the fire out, I'm told they found your husband in a chair in the back of the garage. They pulled him out. When they pulled him out of the house, they found he was not breathing. He did not have a heartbeat. And right now they're trying to work to get those going." Now, if you want to go up there, as long as we don't get in the way to kind of see what's going on, we will allow that. But here's what you're going to see. Your husband is badly burnt. You may not recognize him as your husband. But ma'am, it's your choice, whatever you'd like to do. And she chose yes. So let me ask you this. Did I traumatize her? Here's the thing, and it took me some practice to do this. You and I, if that picture was clear, would see a badly burnt body. It'd be disturbing. What does the wife see? She sees her husband. She sees it very differently. And I've been doing this long enough. Actually have worked with parents who have had, family members murdered, and they hide the crime scene photos because the body's found after it's decomposed for a while. They find the crime scene photos, and in the court, they won't let they protect the family from the photos of the scene. And the family wants to see them, and though they're protected from them, and then every 10 years or so, they get to go back to court because the idiot that killed their kid is trying to get out on parole, and they're hiding the photos from them then as well because it's too horrible. And one of the moms who actually started the Parents of Murdered Children chapter in Portland says one day at a parole hearing, I just said, "Screw this, damn it," and she grabbed this photo from the judge, and she says, "I looked at it, and it was a skeleton in a ditch," and she says, "I imagined it much worse. See, this is my child." The thing, give them a choice. Tell them, be honest with them. Be honest with them. In an ideal world, this guy would have been deceased. We would have had him covered up. I could have told the wife exactly what was under that blanket, and then she could have uncovered what she chose to see. And most of them don't. They just try to find a hand or something. We were still working on the guy. But we told her exactly what she was going to see. It was her decision. No, we didn't traumatize her. Right? And obviously, if this scene's not safe, we can't let people in. But I would recommend, if you got people showing up, and there's significant family members, you call them from the herd, you stand them over there, and you say, "Stay right here, we'll give you information updates as we get them." All right, but you got to stay right here. All right, or crime scenes as well. How's our bladders? Do we need a quick one? Is it realistic to take 10 minutes and be back? Is that okay? Yes. Okay, let's do that. 10 minutes. No, I got it. I understand.
Where are you?
Where am I?
Where are you in Oregon?
I live just south of Portland. Newburgh, Sherwood area.
Oh, yeah. I'm 150 miles upriver in Tri-Cities, Washington.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Home of the Cops.
I know.
Yeah.
You know the Cops?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know
I'm
them
following
very
you
well.
guys because I heard Tri-Cities. I'm from Olympia.
Oh, is that right?
Actually, I think I'm getting ready to go up to Olympia here pretty soon.
I was there last week.
Yeah. In that area of Washington, a lot of bad stuff happens around. Olympia to Seattle.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's rough.
Oh, we trained derailments, suicides, officer-involved shootings.
Oh
my god.
That train derailment, my coworker always stops for Starbucks and then drives down to work. And that morning she's like, I don't want Starbucks for some reason. And she missed being hit by that derailment by 45 seconds.
Isn't that amazing?
And she had trauma from that. I was like, I told my boss, I'm like, she needs EAP. And they're like, no, she's fine. I'm like,
Not if she's talking about it. She got. Has trauma intervention helped at all? You guys, what you do by being on scene, or just, honestly, I was just.
he's lying about everything.
No, I'm not lying.
Sorry, I'm teasing.
The department I retired from we had chaplains. They did not do tip. Because there's a cost to tip. So on the other side of the Willamette River is Clackamas County District 1. And I do a lot of work with them now in the time. They do use tips. They do for civilian, stuff like this. Right,
Yeah.
right.
That's what I was wondering, because it's very good to teach paramedics and firefighters, but I understand in our area, I understand, because I've tried with the firefighters to get tips going, well, we have chaplain. Because they don't want to be on scene doing that anymore. They want to be gone. They want to get back into service. They don't feel like they have the time to be that compassionate. And I think it's very important to teach, and if you can do it, but I hear that a lot, and it's like, that here's a program that will train
Portland
volunteers
uses
to do it.
tips. Clackamas does. I think Vancouver on their side of the river might even use them. The organization I retired from did. We had help from me. We had a really strong chaplain for this, and we really needed to use tips.
So I've run into that in a program I've started teaching. I just call it compassionate crisis care, but my friends call it chaplaincy light. And what it basically is saying, yes, you have chaplains, but when you call me, I still have to respond, and you're usually there before I can get there.
Yeah.
So I've been introducing this, look, I'm not expecting you to do my job, but I can teach you some things like just this, not to put your foot in your mouth. And it's very, very
And
basic
it's the same
level.
training that I had as a tip volunteer. And we would be called by the cops and the firefighters and say, hey, we need your help out here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we go and say it like this, and especially with family members. Like you were saying, same thing. You know, let me check to see if I can take you up there, check in with the incident commander.
Absolutely.
But if I can, I'll get you as close as I can. And you're right. It's like, I just want to see him. And I've done that in the hospitals. I can take you back and let you say goodbye, and then I step back, and they do their thing.
Hospitals have done so much work.
And maybe you can comment on this. My experience has been they're just overwhelmed with training. Nowadays, everything is training. From the scene stuff to the harassment stuff, whatever. So what I do is like, hey, let me come in. I'll just give you guys a quick presentation, like some tips and tricks. I'd never present it as a training. I'm like, oh, this is just like an information
Just an
thing.
education thing.
And-
It's just a bit of education for you.
And it's like, I get the points across, but then ask, like, what are your questions? And then we nail their questions. And so,
But
It's hard.
because a lot of what you're saying is, I've been on these scenes. I've been exactly where you were, the guy that was burnt. I've been in that house. Went to a suicide. The mother was there. The kid suicide. He slit his wrist. She in a white bathroom. So what's in a white bathroom? So she won't go in there. So I'm cleaning up blood. Not
Yep.
supposed to do that, but I'm cleaning up blood so that she can use the bathroom that night.
yep.
So, but talking to her until her family got there. So a lot of this is great because people need to hear that they can be compassionate. You don't have to say that whole, well, you got other kids, good to, how about, I'm so sorry for your loss, and move on.
Oh, the best line I use as a chaplain is I literally just go, this really sucks. And they're like, yeah, it really does. That's all I say.
People I had lunch with, sometimes that we had I'm the director of a trauma retreat, a residential treatment facility for firefighters. We can take 6 at a time, look from all around the world. So the worst of the worst. Had this one client that was really stuck. There's always 2 resident clinicians there. We're working with this guy. We're working with him in the group setting. He can't put a language to his critics, so he's having a hard time processing it. Literally, we're working with him. He can't. The other clinician goes,
Yeah.
this guy goes,
Yes.
and you know what? That was the turning point. We were able to
Because
help
everybody
him.
was kind of
Because
tiptoeing
that
around
makes
it.
sense.
But when they said the right word,
Yeah.
it's like
There
the
was.
And it also
lock
adds
is undone.
levity because you're not being all clinical on them. You're just being real.
Yeah.
And they're like,
It really, and I work with Marines, so
Oh, man.
they got that F word and every other thing.
So it's
Yeah.
refreshing to hear you guys say, "Oh, actually, you use what works."
And-
Does
Yeah,
that make
it
sense
has,
to them?
and I'm glad to hear that you're giving this class, because it kind of opens eyes, because I know that I'm not a firefighter, I'm not a police officer, and I'm not a paramedic. I don't have those guts that I can't do. But
you
I've
clearly have
worked,
some if you've been to these scenes.
but I've been to these as a sidebar, and I know trauma. So, yeah, I was just wondering how that worked for you. Hopefully it does.
Well, and that's because I can't have a tier list of things not to say. It was like 8 months ago, my friend was killed in a climbing accident, and a climbing friend who means really well was like, well, it's okay, you're in the climbing world, another one will die, and you'll get used to it. And I was like, and we're done.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, they're like, oh, it's okay, this is expected in what you do. And I was like, oh, we're done. So that was fun.
Sir.
how I categorize my job, I say it's the worst job in the world, but I love it because I know it's helping me.
There you go. What do you do?
So I'm a lieutenant with the Anne Arundel County Police.
Okay.
But we, it's pretty neat. So we combine crisis response and the police department. So my partner's director of crisis response. She's a licensed social worker.
Cool.
So we have officer clinician pairs. I mean, it's pretty universal, but that's just part of most of the stuff we do is follow up on mental illness. However, on like the Capitol Gazette incident, we were highly involved. Actually, we're presenting on it. I talked about some this morning, and then tomorrow we're doing a 2-hour presentation on our complete response. But then any like major tragedy, they're calling us, but we actually also have teams of 2 clinicians on police radio with police call signs that patrol can call for any incident so that they can respond. So, and that's just a little bit of what, I mean, that's the trauma part.
So you're on the East Coast then?
I'm here.
Are you having City of Portland is 120 officers shy. Nobody will apply. Is that happening on this side of the country?
Yeah, it's universal. I mean, there's part of the problem, people getting through background checks.
And you're right.
So we have, we have people applying.
Yeah.
Some of the issues that happen, some of it with minorities is that it's competitive with minorities. So it used to be when I started, and what I mean by competitive is you can go from place to place and get more money.
Yeah.
You can, for us, it's getting them through the background, getting them through the training. It used to be people went into the police department, and once they were there, it was a 20-year career. We're losing half of our classes within 5 years. And for me, it's that not under government being stupid. Pay more.
That.
And it's sort of,
and I'll tell you,
and then you'll get people to stay, and you'll save money.
So
versus
Portland,
that.
because of the way Portland is wired. Absolutely, yes. You have demonstrations. And when you have a peaceful demonstration, that gives permission to the idiots to try to disrupt it, right? And then blame them. And so now the police have to get involved. And no matter what they do, if they have to use for push, somebody's videotaping it. And the department sometimes says, that looks bad on video, even though you probably had to do that.
Yeah.
And these officers are going, no matter what I do, I'm going to get in trouble. Next time there's a demonstration, I'm going the other way. Screw it.
I hate to say that. I go the opposite. I will de-escalate anybody.
Good for you.
And really, I'm arrogant.
for you.
And the guys in my unit,
You have to do your job.
we will de-escalate anybody.
Cool.
And it's having that mentality.
How do you get that training?
It's changing the culture. It's really changing across.
sad what's going on.
It's getting back to community policing, getting back to the war on drugs created a huge issue with policing, because then it created that competitiveness of how do you judge police? Who locks up the most? Who writes the most tickets? It's getting away from that to saying I'm just a police officer. So if there's a problem in this room, and I come and stand in this room and just stand here and do nothing, and it alleviates the problem, then I do my job.
Absolutely.
But you can't measure that. And people want stats. Think of it, everyone, show me the stats. Across the universe, everything is stat driven, as in, show me the data.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to show
that makes sense.
that change. So it's changing the culture, changing the mentality of policing that you hope as leaders. I mean, we've had a lot of success with it, changing. I still get frustrated with my boss. I was in crisis last night over him being an asshole over homeless issues. Over issues, and I'm bending as I say this. You can't just go evict homeless camps. And even if it's on private property, so a couple years ago, I got a ruling from our Office of Law. Homeless in Maryland are actually protected. So if you violate their rights and you do something wrong, it actually can be a hate crime.
Wow.
So
Well, Pacific Northwest has horrible things.
I hate to say it's universal. It's across the world. It's homeless issues are all over the place now, and So, but no, I really like the class.
Cool. Thank you so much.
So, if I can ever be of help. Absolutely. So, are you familiar with Police CIT?
Maybe not.
So, it's crisis intervention teams.
Okay.
Short history. It's another part of policing. Started in Memphis, Tennessee. The Memphis police in '88 shot and killed a mentally ill person unjustly. So they started 40 hours of hands-on training for police and mental health to gain empathy, understanding, but also to link people to community resources.
Wow.
So what we do is take that training, and that's all. There's never volunteer. It's all volunteer. You take that, and then you throw the SISM on top of it. That gives you the perfect the police, the responders to go out to help the public.
Perfect.
So,
all right, let's reconnect in here, yeah? All right, so if we had a lot of time and we don't, I would make an attempt to put you in the position as a significant other that is now in crisis. And I would create a scenario where you stumbled upon this scene and discovered that was your favorite brother. That's your favorite brother. This is the guy that walks into the room and the room lights up. This is that person. I'd also say, in my experience, that when a significant other shows up at a scene and they see that in fact is a loved one, 4 things will go through your mind when you are in crisis. Number 1, you're going to want to say goodbye to your brother right there. Number 2, you want to be with your brother before he gets cold. And for whatever reason we're holding you back, you will say, I need to get out there before he gets cold. Number 3, you want your brother to look comfortable even in death. And number 4, if you had any differences in your life, you want to reconcile them right there, right now. Those are going to be the 4 needs that go through your processing. Also, we now know that everything, when you find out that's your brother, everything you see here is going to be imprinted in here. And I would say, tell me what you see. What do you see here? If that, in fact, is your brother, what do you notice? He's face down. What else? A lot of blood? Got a shoe missing? Absolutely. What else? Think of this as that is your brother, not your current job. That's your brother. What do you notice? Yeah, he's alone. And so you see things very differently than us. And I'm not saying we always have to post somebody there, but you guys are going to notice that. So knowing that you have those 4 needs, can your brother get cold? Because you want to see them before he gets cold. Have you ever slept in the bed with your feet sticking out? If you're hot? So in your mind, hey, come on, he's uncovered. So how could the responders have taken care of that concern of yours? In some cases, you have to double blanket, yeah? Right. I always thought I would be a millionaire if I made a traffic blanket that covered a full-size adult. So there's my gift to you. Get one of those done. We have to double blanket most people to get the top of their head and the bottom of the feet covered. So then the mere act of me fully covering your brother just took away 25% of your concerns. Does your brother look comfortable? Somebody said he was face down. Is that comfortable? Have you ever been laid face down on asphalt before? I did once in high school, and I learned my lesson, right? How could we have prevented that from going through your mind without moving your brother? Okay, well, because the way his feet are. Yes, you're absolutely right. But we now have discovered he's face down. And the moral of my story is, the reason is, again, fully covering, then you don't know what position he's in. So the mere act of fully covering a body can take away 50% of a significant other's needs when they show up. That's pretty easy to do. 50%, those blankets aren't that expensive. Let's say, and also I will have to say this, you have to work within the laws of your county, of your state. I've been in states where they're not allowed to cover the body for fear of evidence transfer and things like that. And I'm not there to rewrite state law. I'm just saying, okay, if that's your law here, then you share that with the family why you can't cover the body. If it's raining and they're going, put something on them, then you can say, in this state, we're not allowed to do that because they're worried about, they want to know what happened with your loved one, and they're worried that the transfer of stuff might hinder them finding out what actually happened here. All right. So you need to know what's going on in your state. Let's say I'm the person assigned to you to facilitate you coming up here. All right. I'll probably go up to the police agency and get permission with something that's like my organization's belief. If family members show up or a loved one's been seriously injured or dead, they should have a right to come up for a little bit with your permission. I got a brother or sister over here. Can I bring them up, give them a few moments with their loved one, then I will get them off the scene and get them resources. And let's say they're going to say yes. Then I'm going to find the paramedic that maybe declared your brother dead, and I'm going to say, what's under the blanket? Because, see, I don't need to see that. Tell me what's going on. All right, so I'll get that information, and then I'll probably come back to you, say something to the extent of, I am so sorry that your brother's dead. If you'd like to go up there and spend a few moments with them, we can allow that, but here's what I need to tell you. I've been told that it appears your brother may have been hit by a car. And I was told by one of the paramedics that tended to your brother that there's some facial damage and you may not recognize him as your brother. I am so sorry. But if you would like to go up there, we would certainly allow that. And you're going to say yes. We will probably walk up together. When I get about here, I'm going to disengage from you because this is between you and your brother, not between you and your brother and Tim. And in my experience, that's what you're going to do. You're going to look at the blanket, figure out head, feet. Because you know there's some damage under the blanket, you're going to find the shoulder, you're going to hit it, follow the arm down, you're going to reach under and grab the hand, and you do what you're going to do. When I think you've probably had enough time, I might come up, I may or may not put my hand on your shoulder, depending on kind of the vibe I'm getting from you, and say, I am so sorry this happened, but we need to let these folks get back about their investigation of this. Let's go for a walk, and then I'll start. What's your support system look like? Who can I get for you to help you? And that's what we do. That's what we do. It can be that easy. Here's another thing. It doesn't have to be you. Because the last thing I want is for you, particularly if you are a first responder, to think, oh, great, one more responsibility that I have here now. I don't want that. My job is to alleviate stress, not create more. I'm trying to give you the tools to alleviate stress. But here's the thing. It doesn't have to be you. Your job is to recognize somebody should interact with this family member. It doesn't have to be you. Listen, if I'm the paramedic and I worked on your brother and I see his death as my failure, last thing I want to do is show you my failure. I might not be the appropriate person to bring you forward. And I got to be okay with that. But what I do need to do is, hey, we got a brother, sister over there. Maybe I get a chaplain to the scene, facilitate this. Maybe somebody else on my crew can facilitate it. It doesn't always have to be me. I'm okay with that. Just recognize if somebody does show up, somebody should interact with them. That's all I'm asking. I morphed this picture out a little bit too. We talked about those things we shouldn't say. A lot of them are about you don't know what the history is, and I don't expect you to. So let me give you a few examples. Vans tennis shoes. Who know what Vans are? They came out, I think, in the 80s, marketed to who? Skateboarders, punks, independent kids. They spike their hair, they color their hair, they draw with permanent ink markers to simulate tattoos. They know it more than everybody else. Because my son was in junior high when those things came out, and he had to have a pair of Vans. And he didn't even ride a skateboard, but he could be independent. And he wanted a pair of Vans, and I thought that was the ugliest shoe I'd ever seen in my life. And they were like $90 a pair when they first came out. I come from the home of Nike. Nike World Campus is not that far from my house. All right? My son needed a pair of Vans. And he was showing them me in a magazine. It's like, Josh, that's an ugly shoe. And it's like, it's $90. You're in middle school. I can get you 3 pairs of Nikes for $90, and I don't care if you lose one or destroy it. $90, I do care if you lose one of those or destroy it or outgrow it. No, I'm not buying you those shoes, which I think was pretty common in the 80s when those shoes came out. The thing is, if I'm in junior high and I'm sporting a pair of Vans, what's that tell my peers as I'm strutting down the hallway of my school? Who runs your house? Who's got control? That was kind of the culture back then. Well, this kid's got a pair of Vans on. He's on a bicycle. He gets tagged by a Jeep, and the parents end up coming out. And what do you suppose the first thing they see is? They see the vans. And see, that's what happens when you let your little boy grow up before you knew he was ready. What a horrible parent I am. Well, how the hell would the responders have even known that? How could we have prevented that? Cover up the entire body. That's just what you have to do. All right? This girl, on her 16th birthday, her dad takes her to the Department of Motor Vehicles in Oregon, and she scores her driver's license first time, which is not easy in the state of Oregon. And you know how I know that? Because it took me 3 times. First time she scores her driver's license. On her birthday, she is excited. It is Monday. She's excited. And she's calling all her friends. She's home. This is again before cell phones. She's calling all her friends, and she's called the last phone call she makes. She hangs up. Her parents are in the kitchen where she's doing this. She says, "Hey, so, like so-and-so's throwing a party for me on Friday. I am so excited." She's got her driver's license. I'm so excited. And Dad goes, "Great, sweetheart. I know that girl's parents. When's the party start? When do you think it'll be over so I can get you there and I can get you home?" And she's like, "Dad, I got my driver's license." And he goes, "Sweetheart, you've had your license for like an hour." But she says, "Dad," he goes, "No. If you want to go to the party, I will drop you off. I will pick you up. I don't want to hear another word about it." And for the rest of the week, she obeyed. Not a word. But she got up early and started making breakfast before the folks got up. She got home from school, mowed the grass, weeded the flower bed, started washing windows. She vacuumed. She made her bed. And Friday morning, the family is sitting at the breakfast table, and Dad goes, "Your mom and I have been talking. You've been the dream daughter. We're going to let you take the car. I mean, you've proved you're a great girl." And now she's really excited, right? And she goes, "Hey, can I wear makeup?" Because she's never been allowed to wear makeup her entire life. And Dad would say, "Sweetheart, you should have quit when you were ahead." But he didn't, and she bats his big eyelashes at him, and he says, "Yeah, okay." They get called that evening to identify the contents of their vehicle. Now, the lighting is kind of not as good in here, but what do you suppose the first thing they see? The firefighters did an amazing job illuminating this scene, and guess what's popping out? I don't know if you can see it. When this picture isn't a normal thing and the lights are off, that pops out. Worn for the very first time. And that's what happens when you let your little girls grow up before you knew they were ready. That is sad. How could we have prevented that? Cover that stuff up. And here's another thing to think about. I was still at work. Towards the end of my career, I'm listening to the radio, and I've most often did not turn a fire radio on because it doesn't shut up. My organization is pulling 150 calls a day. It doesn't shut up, and I don't need to listen to that. One day I must have been bored. I don't know, but I had the radio on, and I heard dispatcher dispatch a box alarm, which is a big deal. That's a structural assignment to a motor vehicle accident, and so my ears perked up because that's not normal. Structural assignment gets you 3 engines, a ladder truck, and a duty chief. For a car wreck? Are you kidding me? Someone's saying, "Well, dispatch obviously has got some information that I'm not aware of." And as rigs are going into service, you're starting to hear some feedback. And as rigs start to arrive, I can tell by the voice of the firefighters something is up. Battalion chief gets there, takes command, immediately calls for a second alarm. It's like, what? It's coming in as a 2-vehicle accident, a second alarm, which is going to give you 6 engines, 2 ladder trucks, 2 duty chiefs, and now a big support vehicle like a specialty rescue unit. Are you kidding me? What the hell? So I'm listening to this. And they got 2 helicopters in the air now. So I'm listening. And I can hear even in the incident commander, who's a battalion chief, like a seasoned veteran, his voice, something is up. This is not a normal call. So I'm just listening. We're probably 20 minutes into this. Dispatch from command, respond 3 chaplains to the scene. So I'm listening and go, yeah, something's happened. It's bad. So I'm listening. 10 minutes later, command from dispatch, no chaplains are answering the page. Right. Well, I'm the behavioral health guy. So I'm okay, that's my job. I added myself to the box, see if I could help. Civilians are showing whatever's going on. So I added myself to the box alarm. I pull up on this scene, and I pull up behind a ladder truck. Off to the left is a kind of a vacant field, and probably 250 feet out in this field is a van on its top. It looks like there's been a battle out there because there's medical equipment just everywhere. And there's a news helicopter up above filming everything live. Now, so I'm parked behind a ladder truck. My organization, I don't know about where you all are from, ladder companies are the SEALs of the fire service. They're the best of the best. The best of the best work on the ladder companies. It doesn't matter what your gender is. You go to work, you eat, you hit the gym, work out, eat, work out, train, and in between all that, you're running calls. And you can drive by a ladder house at 3 o'clock in the morning when everybody else is in bed, and chances are they're on the roof just doing night operations because they don't sleep. Their arms are bigger than my legs, and they can stand and poop up to their neck and smile at you. And all they want to do is walk right through that wall without any tools. And they will. They are the best in the business. The best in the business. I walk around this ladder truck, and the officer of that truck, a captain, is leaning against the grill of that truck, sobbing. And I thought, whoa, the best. It's like, whoa. And he looks at me, and he tries to hide himself. It's like, what has happened here? A nozzleman is rolling a coil of hose, because the scene's over. He's rolling up a section of hose, and he's watering the asphalt with his tears as he's doing that. It's like, over on the other side of the road, certainly the highway's closed. There's some police officers. Looks like they're interviewing civilians. Civilians are all crying. The officers are all red-eyed. It's like, oh my God. So I work my way through the scene. I find the incident commander. I'm here. What can I help you with? And he said, well, here's what's going on. One of the guys over there I wanted a chaplain for is a contractor, and he was pulling a short-haul concrete trailer to a job, mixing a batch of concrete while he's pulling with a ton and a half truck. The trailer hitch broke. Got an oncoming traffic, hit a van with a mom and 6 little girls in it, and that's the van out there. 5 of the little girls and mom are in critical condition. They've all been flown to the trauma center. There's a girl out there in the van still that's deceased. He says, I don't know what's going on, but he says, look at these people. So I start talking to our folks, and here's what I heard. The medics that were out in the van, she kept looking at me. Well, she was deceased when they got there, but her eyes were open, and in their minds, she's watching me. Then I start hearing people out there, she's got the same pink Costco sweatpants on I just bought my little girl. The moral of the story is, this little girl still out in the van connected with virtually everybody on the scene. The contractor run out there, saw her. Everybody was connected to this little girl. All right? I went back to that truck officer. He's still leaning against his grill. I said, hey, you guys got black Visqueen on this thing, right? Which is rolls of black plastic. Black plastic's cheap. He goes, yeah. I said, why don't you get your crew, take a roll of black plastic out there and cover that van. He says, okay. They took that roll out in the field. They threw it over the van, and that happened. Because let me ask you, did you like looking at that picture? That was sad. That's a sad picture. I don't like looking at that. It's not there anymore. And when they covered up that van, you saw people kind of go, literally, they wiped their tears, they re-engaged, went back to work. It was really, truly out of sight, out of mind. It worked. The helicopter left. I have a problem with immediate scenes like this. I'm not a fan of it. Because listen, if I'm dad and my 6 little girls are late getting off of school and my wife's not answering the phone, hey, turn on the TV, there they are. Oh, come on, are you kidding me? The helicopter left. It's just a pile of black plastic. It's not a film. And when they do open the highway up and people are slowing down, it's a pile of plastic. Keep driving your car. And if the family was to show up, the husband never showed up, but let's say he did. I could have a conversation with him about what's out in that field before I could prepare him. And if he chose to go out there, we can lift up the plastic and he can get under it. It gives him a sense of privacy, gives him a sense that somebody cared enough to protect my daughter from all these idiots that are trying to get pictures and all that other crap. It leaves an imprint that you care. So I'm not saying you have to cover every accident. First of all, cover the body to the best of your ability, but if that scene is going, oh man, that's tough, think about covering the entire car. Use plastic, it's cheap. All right, so things to think about. All right, and then what are your local guidelines on what you can do? If I pull somebody out of bed and I work them and I declare death in the field, I want to put them back in bed. All right? Every county I've worked in, I call the medical examiner, say, this is the program we're trying to roll out. What are your thoughts on this? Can I extubate? Can I take our equipment off? Can I put them back in bed? And here's the first county I worked with said, yeah, do that stuff, just document it. The counties that I retired from, I called every one of those medical examiners and they said, here's the thing. If it's an in-home and in your best opinion, a natural death. and family members are there and you want to facilitate that, give the responding deputy medical examiner a call. Please get permission and then document everything that you do. And in the last 20 years of my career there, we've never been denied a request to put somebody back into bed, to extubate. Never been denied that. So I would just say, find out, if this stuff interests you, find out what your local protocols are so you're not messing up. And obviously, crime scenes, abscess, very, very different. And then I just have to explain to the family why we can't get in there and be near. Sorry. All right. We've talked about some things you shouldn't say. Listen, if you are sincere and authentic, this word, I am so sorry, but you have to mean it. We taught it, some of us were in a death notification class for 8 hours yesterday, and some people's experience was everybody saying, I'm sorry. There's a serial I'm sorry's, and it didn't have any meaning behind it. Yeah, resist that. But if you truly mean it, I am sorry. It has a lot of power to it. And it's easy to remember. It's okay. You don't have to, but it's okay to say, this call's horrible. I was doing a Thursday morning coffee clutch. 10 minutes, I had them rolling in the aisles, which can be concerning with elderly folks. 10 minutes of, this is what my organization can do for you this month. And we got done. I got my crew. We're walking across the parking lot to get on our fire engine. And we hear, hey, wait. We turn around and an old guy's running at us. And he's out of breath when he gets to us. And I said, sir, what can I do for you? He says, you guys were at my house 10 years ago when my wife died. He says, you know what I remember about that day? And I'm thinking, oh, crap. What'd we do, right? I said, no, sir, I don't know what you would have remembered. He says, when you guys, and it wasn't me. I'd like to take credit for this one, but it wasn't me. He says, when you guys declared my wife dead in my house, a firefighter came up to me and said, it is hard to see somebody lose somebody they love. That's what the firefighter said. And then he looks right at me and goes, you guys really care, don't you? I was speechless. And you see me, it's not easy to make me speechless. I didn't know what to say. I'm thinking, oh my God, 10 years ago had to be the worst day in this guy's life, and what does he remember? How nice a firefighter was. Are you kidding me? If I could do that once in my career, my job on earth is done. That's everybody's wish, to make that kind of an impact. That's what he picked up. And it was just you don't have to. But it was just a firefighter who said, this is hard. That's amazing. So it goes a long ways. We also talked about touch and death notification. And there's a lot of power in human touch. And sometimes I can't put words to it. And this is like a universalist, this is a horrible day. But if you do this and they go like this, don't chase them around the room. Not everybody is receptive to it. So you got to kind of figure that out. All right. We had a car get off the highway and hit 12 tourists that didn't speak the same language we did and killed like 6 of them. Well, we can't talk to them, and the medics just were doing this, and they knew exactly what was going on. That was how they communicated. This is a universal, today sucks, in chaplain speak. This is how you flip a scene. I had just declared a death in the field of an elderly man, dies natural causes in the house. And here's how I would handle that if the wife is present. So we dosed out the bad news. We declared a death. He's on the floor. And once we declared the death, I said, so here's what's going to happen. I'm going to call for a deputy medical examiner, which was required in the state because your husband wasn't attended by a physician. It's not looking for fault. It helps us to decide what happened to your husband. Right? While we wait, you and I are going to go into the kitchen, sit at the table, and I'm going to get some more information about your husband, past medical history, medicine he's taking, things like that. While you and I are doing that, my crew, we're going to get our equipment off the body. We're going to put your husband back into bed, if that's where we got him. If we didn't, we'll leave him on the floor. Is there a blanket you'd like us to cover him with? I hate bringing yellow traffic blankets into a house. I don't like that. Do you want us to put a pillow under his head? Do you want his head covered or not? And in my experience, it's been about 50-50 on covering the head or not. It's been about 50-50 if they want a pillow. But remember, part of their concern is they look comfortable even in death. And then when they are done here, and you and I are done at the kitchen table, he's all yours. And that's. You asked them. Oh, absolutely. Well, yeah. And then when we're both done, then he's all yours. That's what I would do. I got this lady at the kitchen table. She's sobbing. I'm asking her questions about medical history and, when the last time she saw him, and she can't answer. Above the dining room table on the wall is a retirement plaque from the Southern Pacific Railroad. The name on the plaque is the name on my chart. And I said, I see your husband retired from the railroad. She got cognitive, gave me this amazing history lesson. And I like history. Amazing history lesson of the Southern Pacific Railroad through the Willamette Valley and her husband's role in its development. I got that. She got the impression that this guy cared enough to ask. It flips a scene. I teach firefighters, you're waiting, you have that uncomfortable moment if you're sitting with somebody, the deceased person's maybe in the other room, or they might be in the same room, covered up, and it's like, man, what do you talk about? Here's what you talk about. How long have you guys been married? What do you guys used to like to do together? Because who else is going to ask them that? Make them a human. They're still human. That will flip the scene. You cared enough to ask. That's the imprint that you will leave. Right? My son, right? It was a bad call for the folks that showed up. I would hate going out on somebody's kid, right? Here's the thing. After that call, 2 of the paramedics that I knew quit, which is sad. My best friend got fired because he started drinking and he couldn't stop, ended up getting arrested and losing his job. I can only assume I was attributed to that experience, because that's when he started drinking. The guy that met my wife at the door quit that organization, went to another one, couldn't work on the line anymore because he became such an a-hole. He went into the fire marshal's office where he became such an a-hole. The organization said, retire early or we will fire you. So 4 people. And here's, I think, the reason. Because the opposite of getting into your frontal lobes is the rear lobes. That tends to be our default. That's where the coulda, woulda, shoulda comes from. Posterior cingulate. We are the masters of that because it's got to be better, better, better. What did I miss? Who would have done this? And I think that's where those guys got. You can face that out by staying in the frontal lobes. Leaving an imprint. We're going to do what we can. We're going to treat this mom with the same care and respect. We're going to even treat the child with the same care and respect we would want our child treated. And you stay in the front. It's don't get me wrong. It's tragic. It's horrible. It hurts. But you stay in the frontal lobes, which is where we live longer and we stay happier, right? So you can phase that out by just treating people with care and respect. So let me fly through this. What kind of time we have left? Like 9 minutes? All right. Let me fly through these just really quick. So in-home deaths. Listen, elderly people get old and they die. We tend to be okay. We tend to be okay with that because that's part of the life cycle, right? Find out what your local protocols are. Make them look comfortable. If it's a natural death and you're allowed to let the family do some visitation rights, do that. Treat these people with care and respect. Kids are very different because that's not part of a normal life cycle. So we treat those scenes very, very differently. And it cannot be black and white. For those of you that are paramedics, pediatric stuff cannot be black and white. I was my organization used to bring 150 paramedics in at a time for what they called advanced life support, continuing ed twice a year. It was mandatory. You got to come in twice a year for continuing ed. And depending on what the topic was, they would bring the experts in the field. And the day I'm going to talk about was Pediatric Day. So we have pediatric docs from the area trauma centers. They're pulling up case reviews of pediatric calls we've been out on. Then the EMS chief gets up there and talks about our protocols and they run through some codes and things like that. This doc gets up there. He puts up a case review, puts up a chart. Hey, and the paramedics on the chart are in the room, and it's a SIDS. And this doc basically looks at this crew and says, how dare you bring a dead baby to my hospital and interrupt my emergency room? And I ended up taking offense to that. Can you imagine that? And I was no longer working the line. I was in behavioral health. So it's like, what are you going to do? Pull me off a rig? And so I stood up in the back and said, hey, help me understand this. I'm hearing you say the kid shouldn't have been transported. I'm not going to argue that. But I am not so sure it can be that black and white. He's looking at me. He's like, so they brought that kid in and he was dead. He goes, yes, and they shouldn't have done that. That's right. I said, okay. So what I'm hearing you say is, we get dispatched to a baby not breathing. Get to the house, family takes you back into the nursery, you find a baby in a crib, and your best professional opinion, that child probably died sometime during the night. He's dead. And you're telling me not to work him. And he's going, yeah, why waste everybody's resources? All right, okay, I'm not saying. Let's say you get dispatched to that same call. Parents take you back to the nursery, and your best professional opinion is a child is not salvageable. And I go to tell the family, I'm so sorry, but your child's dead. And dad goes, he was crying 5 minutes ago, do something. Well, now what am I going to do, doc? Tell him you're lying? And then because I can be sarcastic, I said, you were not at the scene, right? So how can you say that what they did was wrong? Because see, most paramedics not just look at the child when it's a baby, they look at the dynamic of the family. And if a dad tells me that kid was crying 5 minutes ago, I don't care what I say, I'm going to work him. Right? My punishment for that was I went to the trauma center and taught this to the emergency room fellows. Because they had to do something to me, right? And I was like, oh, okay, all right. Listen, the most difficult calls, the most difficult decisions you'll ever have to make. I'll get to your question in just a minute. I'm going to talk a little fast. Oh, you're giving me a 5. Okay, thank you. Let me know when it's 2, and I'll say, hey, peace to you as well, right? Listen. Hospitals are better prepared to deal with grieving family members. I'm not saying all kids should be transported. I've also found if there's an intervention at the scene, if you're dosing out the news, sometimes it's parents to say, you can stop. And that makes it a little easier. Well, I guess the moral of the story is they're crazy difficult. It can't be in black and white. And just be prepared to check in with each other after one of those. Out-of-home deaths, the reason that is cover the body. If it's in a car, maybe even thinking about covering the car, if it's got that kind of stuff going on. Grossly disfigured bodies. Sometimes in my best professional opinion, I don't think anybody should see this. All right? There's 3 options. Option A is to tell the family, I think maybe you should wait till your loved one gets to the morgue, where it's clean, it's safe, it's private, before you engage with your loved one. And I've never, ever had anybody accept that from me. Option B is I try to find like a family advocate or a friend that they trust, a neighbor sometimes. Take them for a walk, not get them to where I traumatize them, but get them to where they understand what's going on and say, do you think they should see this? And when they go, no, can you go back and tell them? And when they go back and say, you know what, no, don't go out there, the family tends to accept that over somebody they know telling them than me. They don't know who I am. If they still are going to go out there, here's what I tend to do. I'll cover the scene up to the best of my ability. I will tell them exactly what's under that tarp, exactly. That's the guy say it's your choice. And in my experience, they go up, they stand next to the tarp, and that's all they do. They just need to be where it is. All right? Dealing with difficult people, listen, 3 strikes, you're out. Right? If you interfere with what I'm trying to do, I got to remove you from the room. The thing is, what I've also discovered is, why don't you want us to touch them before I remove them? And in most cases, they will tell you, it's like, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. How about if we try this? And you just ask why they're agitated. Just use your CISM skills on them, right? So, if I was teaching a group of fire chiefs, police chiefs, administrators, I would make them pull out a business card right now. And on that business card, I would make them write care. And if it's a group of fire chiefs, then I might wait, 10, 15 minutes for them to actually accomplish that, right? And then what I make them do is, this is what it means to me. Everybody in your charge, I want them to look at every scene that they encounter. Are they compassionately assessed? Not just the patient. Is there an elderly woman looking around the corner, she doesn't want to interfere? Is there a child hiding is they're frightened? Engage with them. They are now your patients as well. And then we respect everybody. We respect everybody living. Am I treating this elderly woman with the same care and respect I would want my mom treated if my dad just died? Am I treating everybody? Am I treating this elderly gentleman on the floor with the same care and respect that I would want my dad treated if he just passed away? Because every study out there would say, if I can treat even a dead body with the same care and respect I would want my loved one treated, I do better emotionally in the long run. And this is about me. Right? And so this whole thing, to kind of wrap it up, it's a little bit like herding cats, yeah? Herding cats ain't easy. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to listen to these, they're not cowboys, they're cat boys. Listen to what they have to say, because it really resonates with kind of what we just learned.
This man right here is my great-grandfather. He's the first cat herder in our family.
Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy.
Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-wild short hairs, well, that's another thing altogether.
Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning, right here, and if you look at his face, it's just ripped to shreds, you know?
You see the movies, you hear the stories, I'm living a dream. Not everyone can do what we do.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and you ain't lost a one of them, ain't a feeling like it in the world.
Huh? Yeah, you hear those folks? Listen, it's not easy. It's not easy. But I wouldn't do nothing else. You bring a herd into town and you ain't lost a one of them, there's not a feeling like it in the world. Those guys are living the dream. You leave an imprint when somebody's having the worst day of their life, that somebody was in their home or in that intersection that cared about them, there's not a feeling like it in the world. Truly for us. Yes, sir. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Well, and being what I do, treating injury, the problem is they don't allow themselves to be real people. There's a predictable response to a horrible tragedy, and we don't allow ourselves to do that. Not if you know it. All right. So that being said, thank you for your time, your interest in this. If you want a book, hey, I'll sign it for you. They're selling them upstairs. The more you buy, the less I have to take home. Yeah. But again, thank you for what you do. Thank you.